Welcome to Moving Forward, conversations on culture, identity, healing, and hope. I'm your host, Linda Anderson, and I created this podcast as a space for real, heartfelt conversations with people who are reflecting, evolving, and boldly stepping into what's next. This podcast was born out of my own journey through seasons of loss, transition, and transformation, and my belief that healing happens when we come together to share our stories. My hope is that these conversations will inspire you to pause, reflect, and find courage as you move forward in your own life. Today's conversation invites us to slow down and think differently about wellness, not as a product, a trend, or a quick fix, but as a human experience shaped by identity, community, and meaning. My guest is Jordan Carroll, a wellness strategist, founder, and storyteller who helps wellness leaders move beyond features and metrics to build brands rooted in connection and belonging. Jordan works with founders who are building in the middle of uncertainty, leaders navigating growth, change, and pressure while trying to stay aligned with their values. Through his work, he helps transform businesses into movements by clarifying purpose, defining community, and telling stories that resonate on a human level. He is also a certified breathwork instructor, managing partner of Median Run Club Group, and creator of High Performance House Co-Living, spaces that are designed to support both performance and presence. At the core of Jordan's work is a belief that even in a world shaped by AI and rapid innovation, people are craving something deeply human: connection, meaning, and trust. This conversation is about what it takes to build that, personally and professionally, as we continue to move forward. So, Jordan, thank you so much for taking your time and joining us today on Moving Forward.
Thanks for having me, Linda. It's wild to hear how many things I'm doing. Hey, would you say it like that? I was like, oh well, yeah, that's kind of interesting. That's an interesting life, an interesting story. So
yeah, you're a busy guy. So here's my first question though. So before those titles and the work you do now, who were you and what experiences shaped the way you see wellness today?
I think the experience that shaped me the most in how I see wellness today was actually the opposite, was substance abuse. So I think a deep addictions and difficulties with alcohol and drugs were the main things that format how I look at wellness today. And I think sometimes going to the opposite extremes in feeling the pain and the shame and the difficulty can often lead to the breakthroughs of what's on the other side, which is where I'm at now and where I feel like I am attempting to help others. So that's probably the most. There's obviously a lot of things that have happened in my life prior to the commitment to what I'm doing now. But if I look at the most significant thing, it was deep struggles with alcohol mostly.
Definitely, wellness is clearly personal to you. So when did it shift from interest to mission?
I would say there was a period in my life, and I think I look at life holistically. I think that work impacts your personal life, and your personal life impacts your work, and both of those impact your relationships, and vice versa. And your health is a part of that too. And there was a point in time where I believe I was transitioning out of corporate America. This was around 2017, and I was deciding that I wanted to travel the world. And I ended up leaving the US in 2018, early 2018 in March, to start traveling. And I quit a high paying corporate job, and I decided that I was going to work for myself and I was going to just figure it out. I had enough savings and runway to be able to pay for some trips. And I ended up traveling to 4 different countries in 4 months with a group of 40 people that I had never met before, which was a really interesting experience in itself. And while I was doing that, I was changing my work, and I was deciding a little bit more intentionally about what I was doing for work rather than being in this corporate environment where I did not feel fulfillment or excitement. I was starting to ask myself, like, what do I actually want to do? And that also sparked an openness in my social life and in my personal development in different parts of my journey where I could ask myself, what else do I want from life? And I'd say that would there these big catalysts that I can look back at moments and say, okay, that was a big change. That was certainly one. Was I had broken up with my ex-girlfriend, decided to leave the US, and I quit my job in the
Mm.
span of 30 days.
Wow.
And so from that shift, now I'm traveling across the world and I'm, trying out these new businesses and working freelance contracts and traveling and meeting people that I never met, being in cultures I'd never been to, and learning a lot about myself in that process. And I think that that was a big step in initially turning some of this into mission, but ultimately it was quitting alcohol, which I did in 2018. Or was it 2018? Yeah, August of 2018. And going through some, I had already thought about quitting for a long time. And I'd had moments where I had gone months and months without drinking, but there was a few more instances where it was very apparent and obvious to me that I needed to actually just quit. And then once I did that, it changed how I identified with myself. And it also changed how I wanted to express things to people. And it forced me to recalibrate a lot of my relationships because many of them at that time were, the things that we did were revolved around drinking. So I think that that helped change an identity piece in me. And then I think when you get to the identity layer in changing the way that you look at yourself, the way that you talk about yourself, you're you're able to change maybe what that mission is. And that's, if I think back at what the answer to your question, I think those were a couple of moments that really impacted that.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And I appreciate you sharing though about how you were navigating, that time period in your life and that uncertainty. And now you are working with founders who are often building while they're also navigating uncertainty. So what patterns do you notice in how these leaders respond to discomfort or challenge?
Yeah, everybody is, I mean, I think that's part of the human condition, is dealing with uncertainty and dealing with challenge. I don't think it's different if you're a founder or if you're a garbage man or if you're someone working at a school. So whatever it might be, I think that there's difficulty and uncertainty. Certainly there are industries that move faster than others. And especially if you look at what's happening right now in different industries, in the wellness industry, how it's being impacted by technology. I think that's the biggest uncertainty for everyone right now, is how is AI going to impact what our product or our service might look like in 6 months, in a year, and things that took, a decade now are, things to validate, or cycles of technology, things that took like a decade before are taking a month now. So what you're seeing is the rapid improvements are like exponential in the tech space, and I think it's impacting a lot of how people are viewing their businesses. One thing that I get particularly excited about is in-person experiences, and how AI and how computer work is changing quite frequently, and computers are now able to do things without humans. So once that continues, it's going to just continue and continue to the point where a lot of computers and agents, electronic agents, are going to be doing things without the need for human intervention. And that's going to also push humans to want to be in person more. And I think that's going to be, it's already a pretty big trend in the wellness space, but it's also one thing you didn't list on your intro for me, which you wouldn't know, but I'm working on a space here in Colombia, specifically a wellness center here in Medellin. That yeah, I'm in the early stages of negotiations with a few different partners to build something where we can have in-person experiences that are focused on wellness, health, contrast therapy, exercise, things like that.
So I'm hearing you say that you're working on its next project too. So you're obviously your own relationships with everybody in Colombia. So how has your own relationship, but with challenge, shaped the way that you lead and support the others?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a few things to unpack there. I think there's different challenges. So some challenges of working in Colombia, for instance, is that it's a different culture. And, in some of my businesses, I have a few businesses that are online businesses. So I work with people all over the world, and I have employees in South Africa or Pakistan or Canada, the US. And so you have this mix of people in different time zones that have different cultures. And that's already something that is worth exploring when you're a leader, is how do I interact with people differently based on where they're from, based on what's culturally normal for them, based on how they want to be led. So there's the cultural part and that influence, which I think is important. And then there's, in addition, there's the piece of like, how do I want to show up as a leader? So you don't want to change yourself for everybody, but you do want to, as a leader, understand how you might be interpreted. And that was one thing I had to really learn. That was a big challenge coming to Colombia, because um, one of the difficulties here is that there's just a different pace of life. There's a different, um, it's obviously a different language too. I did, I learned Spanish, and that's another thing. But there's not just learning the language. There's learning like the nuances of the language, where in conversation with somebody here, you would never just go up to somebody and start talking to them. You would always ask them how they're doing first.
Mm.
Like little things like that, where in the US, I think there's a bit more directness of like just getting to the point. But pretty much every time that I talk, like I have a house manager that works here in our co-living, and every time that I text her, let's say I texted her 2 hours ago, uh, I wouldn't start the conversation, or I wouldn't just like continue the conversation from a couple hours ago via text. I would actually ask her again how she's doing.
Mm.
Just like little things like that,
Yeah.
where if you don't realize how you're communicating with someone, they might be interpreting what you're saying or doing as rude. So you just want to be like mindful of that.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up too, because this podcast is about also conversations on culture. I appreciate you bringing that up, what you're learning and what you've continued to learn while being in Colombia. So, Jordan, you often do challenge, though, the idea that a great product is enough. But why do you think that mindset still dominates the wellness industry?
Um, well, I think so I can speak specifically to like some of the segments that I'm seeing with what's particularly interesting to me right now is wellness spaces that host in-person experiences.
Mm.
And when I look at what's happening here in Colombia, for example, what I'm seeing is that there are a lot of big hotel groups and real estate moguls, people that have a lot of money to put towards really nice spaces. They are focused on building wellness spaces that are mostly focused on the hotel guests. So they'll mostly be like these big hotel
Mm.
groups, and they'll build this really nice facility in a hotel. And mostly the way that they think about it is that hotel guests will use it, and they'll have people that go up there and pay a premium to get a massage, or
Mm.
get some sort of contrast therapy, whatever. What I think a lot of these places are missing is a sense of community, in that the social dynamics and the way that people are socializing and want to socialize in the new generations is that they actually want to socialize at a sauna, or
Mm.
in an ice bath, or doing something different than drinking. Drinking is down uh, to the lowest point that it's ever been,
Mhm.
or at least in like 50, 60 years. I don't know the exact statistics, but I have read some statistics about the trends in alcohol consumption, and it's way down. And what you're seeing is Gen Z, even like a lot of millennials, are kind of rejecting that they should go to the nightclub on a Friday or Saturday, and they're going to these wellness centers. And a lot of them are going there for dates. A lot of them are going there for classes that they take. And there's a few different places that are doing this really well in the US and Canada, but it hasn't really come down here yet to Colombia. And that's what gets me excited about being a first mover here in Colombia.
So you're talking about communication and how things are a little bit different in hotels and so on, but what does create trust and loyalty in wellness brands today?
Well, I think you first start with, this is what's worked for us, is that you first start with a really high value offer or experience that's completely free. And you build it from the heart and you build it from what you want to see in the world. I think that if you can do that and you can be someone in the wellness space that is building because you actually want what you're creating to exist, you come from a different place than if you're doing it out of the need for money. Because right now, like where we're going with our wellness communities, building, potentially building real estate, looking at
Mhm.
products, other offers, it all started with almost 2 years of building free community and just creating a space for everybody consistently to come and socialize and exercise. And that's what we've been doing with the Medellin Run Club, for instance. We've met almost every Sunday for 2 years.
Mm.
It'll be 2 years in April. And, there's almost 300 people now that come out every week to meet. So you think about the kind of value, like we did a Valentine's Day run last week, and uh, we had at the end point we were giving out these heart lollipops, and we had like notes that were people you could pass a note to somebody else, and like just little fun things like that just come from us understanding the community dynamics, and then it's content. So having a really keen eye on the branding, the aesthetic, and the content that you create is extremely impactful. And if you look at our social media, it's very much on the run club side. It's more of like this meme culture. It's lighthearted. It's funny. It's kind of looking at the trends of like short form video and how people create that and creating videos that mirror what's going really well in other for other accounts, and then applying that to our community. So we grew really fast because of that, and then people come back because they just love the experience, and we're very consistent, like almost every week for, I think we've missed maybe 5 weeks in almost 2 years, and it's been because of either weather or stuff that we couldn't control, or like a break for the holiday.
And I also in the relationship, I can even hear it from your voice and the stories you're telling, and I'm sure the listeners are hearing it too. But you had also mentioned AI and that we're seeing these rapid advances in AI and health technology. But then at the same time that people are craving this deeper connection. So how do you make sense of that tension?
Yeah. Well, I think what's really great is that AI and technology is going to give us these really incredible opportunities to learn about our bodies, learn about comorbidities, learn about things that we can either fix or we can prevent, um, in ways that we weren't able to do before. The only thing, so there's that on
Mhm.
one side, like technology is pushing that, where we're going to have more access to more data and more information about our health, and that's going to help solve problems in health and wellness and things like that. So there's that, and then I think there's just people spend a lot of time on computers and phones, and I think there's this pendulum that happens, and you look at throughout human history the different things that we go through, these cycles that we go through, and I think there'll be a pendulum with AI and just with computer work, and people just being tired of being on the computer, people being
Mhm.
tired of AI. And I think the mind in that, and the like, you start to go online, and what you start to see is a lot of AI generated content. And there's something in the human brain that I think even subconsciously has an aversion to, because it's all coming from the same LLMs. Like a lot of them are coming from a lot of stuff that people are creating is just coming from ChatGPT or Claude or some of these different language learning models. And essentially, these things are just saying the same things to people,
Mhm.
and they're giving them the same output, and then people are posting that as if it's their own. And I think over time, us as a culture, we start to be able to tell. I've been able to tell because I've been using AI since it became widely accessible to the public. And so I can tell within 5 seconds if something's AI written.
Mhm.
And I'm also a writer. I wrote a book a couple of years ago, and I did it without AI. I know how long that takes. And now I'm just seeing all this writing. And it's I write pretty much every day, so I can tell, and I have this aversion to it. I'm thinking other people will too. And so the pendulum goes back to, okay, we're going to go back to in-person experiences. It's kind of how COVID happened. It's like
Mhm.
COVID drove everybody to be inside, drove everybody to be in quarantine. And then there was this like pressure valve that got released where it was like, oh, we can go and see other people and hang out. And wow, like it's a little bit maybe for introverted folks or people that were enjoying being inside, that there was maybe an adverse reaction. But a lot of people were like, I can't wait to go outside and see my friends. I can't wait to go to the movies. I can't wait to go to live shows. I can't wait for this. So there's this pendulum that happens in our culture, and I think we'll see that with AI and computer work as well.
So when you look ahead, what gives you the most hope though about the future of wellness?
Um, yeah, I have a lot of hope in general. Um, I think the thing that gives me the most hope is that people are just caring more about their bodies,
Mm.
and about what they put in their bodies, about healing themselves. I think there's just more information than there's ever been on uh being able to heal yourself. I know there's like, contrary to that, there's like too much information and there's like too much noise. But I think yeah, what makes me really excited about it is having more information available, and then also just that people care more. And I think it's not just a trend because it's cool to do. I think there's something to be said about people just wanting to live longer, and people wanting to take care of themselves, people wanting to feel good, people wanting to continue to raise the consciousness of our humanity in
Mhm.
spite of what else is going on, because there's a lot of other things going on that is lowering our consciousness. But
I want to go back to the AI conversation, and you have a lot of knowledge in that and really trying to help the listeners with the brain and so on that you were talking about. So, on that note, what role should technology play in wellness without overwhelming the human experience?
mm, yeah, it's a tough one because I think technology exists to continue to get more advanced. So it's not as if I think it's going to get less advanced. I think the way that that coexists a bit more is that more more people will be able to access higher level care and health, whether it be healthcare or whether it be information about their health, and they'll be able to advocate for themselves more. Because as the technology becomes cheaper to produce, as these language, these AI models become more specific, as technology exponentially increases, it also drives down the cost to the end user. So, at the beginning of when ChatGPT and some of these large language models came out, AI was really really expensive and really really difficult to access for the most part. And then as it's rolled out to the public, and as the free market basically produces more competition, you have the cost being driven down. So I think that happens the same in health and wellness, where you have a lot of really smart people with access to really advanced technology trying to bring something to market that's competitive. And when they compete for the end user's attention and money and things like that, what you'll see is the costs go down. And yeah, when that happens, it's like, I think about certain care modalities that are pretty much inaccessible to most of the human population, like hydrogen therapy, or there's like IV treatments, there's
Mm.
um, hyperbaric chambers, there's leg compression devices, there's just like all these different things that are very expensive to produce, that I think as technology continues to get better, they become cheaper to produce, cheaper to distribute, more common, and then it becomes more accessible to more people.
Yeah. I know you work with founders, people starting companies or wellness and so on, but many of these founders, they struggle to articulate what truly differentiates them. Why is that clarity so hard to find when you're in the middle of building?
Um, yeah, I think this is like a difficult for any business in general, is that there's a temptation to sound like everyone else. There's a temptation to use business models that already work, that you can see that are proven. There's a temptation to, a lot of people are using AI, and AI is taking things from a place. AI is not generating anything new. It's essentially copying a range of different sources and then creating something from those sources. So when everybody's creating from the same places,
Sure.
it's pretty easy to sound like everybody else. And then I think there's a mindset piece of selling, like building a community and then understanding how to sell to that community versus just selling into the void. Or people can use paid advertising and can do all sorts of other techniques. But I think one thing that's in the wellness space particularly that's interesting is when you can build a community first and use that community as the launch point for a product or for a service. It can become a lot more useful, in my opinion.
So I'm going to start wrapping up just a little bit because I definitely have some personal questions I want to ask as
Okay,
far as
sure.
what does moving forward mean to you in this current season of your life and your work?
Yeah, there's a few things. As I mentioned, I'm working on this wellness project of bringing real estate here, and moving forward to me is about patience as much as it's about progress. And for me, what that means is like I have three really great opportunities, for instance, and it'll be interesting to like re-listen to this episode once
Mm.
I maybe have made a decision or there's more progress. But there's three opportunities that I'm in negotiations with at various different stages, that each one of them is with a different partner, each one of them is with a different capital group, each one of them is potentially different scale, each one of them is a completely different project with a slightly different visions. There's just so much nuance and variety in all three of them.
Mm.
And when I think about moving forward, it's like I'm having conversations with all three of them this week. And it's not to like make a decision, it's to continue to build data to understand what it is that I'm most aligned to do. And there's a portion of it in the patience aspect where my belief in God and my belief in faith has really helped me to be patient, because I think there's a lot of times in my life where I've rushed into partnerships, I've rushed into decisions, I've rushed into different things thinking that they were the right thing. If I would have just given it a little bit more time, I would have been able to see a bit more clearly what the right decision was. And it's not to say that any decision's wrong, because I think all decisions are the correct decision. You'll learn from it, or you'll gain from it, or in some way. But just using these as an example, I think moving forward just means what's that next step that I need to take, knowing that I can take that step, but I can also maintain a high level of patience.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing up your faith too. I think that's very helpful to see in your own season of life now
Mm-hmm.
versus where you were and taking us through that journey. So thank you for that. Another question I have though for you is, as you do look at your communities, your brands, the founders that you are helping shape, what do you hope that people feel and who do you hope they become because of the spaces that you're helping to create?
Yeah, the thing that comes to mind that's most important is that you can connect with others and you can have fun, and you can do that in an environment that doesn't require you sacrificing your integrity, sacrificing your health, sacrificing what you really want to be doing. And what I found is a lot of people that come to our events because they're alcohol free, because they're focused on wellness and health, is that they didn't realize that they could socialize in these types of environments. They just thought that they'd have to go out and drink and go to the club or go to the bar or whatever. And there's this whole other category of social life that can be done in a sauna or in a workout class or sipping smoothies instead of cocktails. And it does require you, if you are used to being in environments where you're inebriated, and I've trust me, I've been there. Like I had to make this shift myself, but I realized like I was more of myself when I was not inebriated. I was more happy, more excited, more social when I was not inebriated, and I was more connected to myself and to God, which has become very important to me. And in those moments when I feel that connection, it's much easier to relate to others. Whereas previously I was relating to others through a place of disconnection and through a place of not being myself.
So this final question, you might have touched on it a little bit, but I really want to end with this one is if someone listening does feel stuck, whether it's in their health, their work, their sense of direction, what is one small shift they could make tomorrow that moves them toward a more human experience of wellness?
Yeah, I think it's personal to everyone, and I would actually ask that person to think for themselves of what they could do, and my encouragement would be, what's the smallest thing that you could commit to tomorrow? Not the big boil the ocean. Let me add 10 new habits. Let me start a completely new morning routine. Let me do this. It's like, could you do 1 minute of meditation tomorrow? Could you do 1 minute of breath work? Could you replace one meal with something healthier? And like you start with what is the smallest thing. And my recommendation is also always to get external accountability. In my life, whenever I've had a coach or whenever I've had someone that's keeping me accountable to what it is that I need to do or I want to do, I've been more successful. And when you try to do things alone, it can be much easier to let yourself off the hook. So the first thing is, what's the smallest increment of change? Because for some people, they may feel more connected to like doing meditation or breath work. Some people may feel more connected to changing their nutrition or walking a mile or walking a half mile or whatever it might be. It just depends on where that person's at. So I'd ask that person, like, what would they be most excited to change? And then what's the smallest increment of change? And then who can you ask to hold you accountable?
I always get sad when conversations have to end because they're so
Mm,
empowering. And I thank you so much for this conversation, Jordan, and really for reminding us that wellness, it isn't built through optimization alone, but through the honesty, trust, and the spaces that we create for one another. What stands out is the idea that movements don't grow from perfect strategies, as you said. They grow from people who are willing to show up with clarity, humility, and purpose, and even in uncertainty. And thank you for that. To our listeners, as you reflect on today's conversation, I do invite you to consider the following. Where in your life or work are you being called, not just to improve something, but to help people feel they belong? Because the future of wellness and really the future of leadership may depend less on what we produce and more on the environments that we create, as Jordan is so doing. So until next time, thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this community. And thank you for continuing to move forward with purpose and possibility.